Hi. Today I thought I would do a rather long chapter from our book of 50 words called The Spiritual Practice of Everyday Life. Is Judaism a religion of heaven or earth? Is Torah preoccupied with this world or the next? Where is the locus and focus of spiritual endeavor and fulfillment to be found? The sages teach without bread there is no Torah. More than just communicating an inescapable fact of human existence, this teaching, when understood properly, can serve as the mission statement of Torah itself. The Hebrew word for bread, the foundational staple of the human diet, is lahem, a cognate of the word lochem, a warrior. The Zohar teaches the time of eating is the time of battle, and one who desires bread should eat it at the point of a sword. In Judaism, the spiritual battlefield is not limited to overtly spiritual moments, such as when one is wrapped in a tallis and absorbed in fervent prayer in the synagogue. Torah's true mission is to bring heaven down to earth, to suffuse the physical world with spiritual energy and light. The Torah's ultimate concern extends beyond the prescribed bounds of ritual and worship, including also and even especially the seemingly mundane aspects of human experience and existence. Everyday activities such as getting dressed, eating breakfast, or doing business all fall into the purview of the Torah's mission to divinize our lives. In fact, bread is used in scripture and in rabbinic writings as a symbol for various forms of physical engagement, including marital relations. Every moment of life is thus a battle, an opportunity to open ourselves to the divine presence in that experience. In many religions, the highest ideal is to remove oneself from all worldly pleasures for the sake of the spiritual enlightenment. Judaism, on the other hand, teaches that the real battle is not to withdraw from the material realm in order to avoid the obstacles it presents to spiritual devotion, but to engage and uncover the spiritual purpose within one's everyday activities. An interesting example of this principle is found in the case of the Nazarite. A Nazarite was someone who chose to consecrate themselves to God by living a more reclusive, ascetic, and isolated lifestyle for a period of time. Surprisingly, these fervent spiritual seekers were instructed to bring a sin offering at the conclusion of their vow. In explanation of this curious law, the Talmud teaches that this was in order to atone for their misplaced self-imposed asceticism. In the words of the Jerusalem Talmud, is what the Torah forbade not enough for you? That you must voluntarily forbid other things too? Simply put, completely withdrawing from the sensual world is not the Jewish way to live a spiritual life. To the contrary, one's true spiritual state is revealed precisely in how one integrates their physical and spiritual needs and desires. This path of integration is what ultimately resolves the seemingly intractable dichotomy between spirit and matter that has troubled so many mystics and philosophers from the time immemorial. From the Jewish perspective, the holy work of the spiritual warrior is to acknowledge and amplify the sacred presence within all aspects of existence. For instance, the Talmud teaches a person's true character is certain by three things: his cup, how he eats; his pocket, his financial dealings; and his anger, how he treats others. Notice that none of these examples include any specifically spiritual activities. They are, in fact, all about how one conducts oneself in material and social realms. Moreover, when a person arrives in the world to come, the first question he is asked is not about spiritual matters. Rather, it is, did you engage in business with honesty? Judaism teaches that one's spiritual state is expressed not only in their levels of learning or depth of prayer, but in how they conduct themselves on the most physical of levels. As Maimonides writes, just as a wise man is distinct in his wisdom and his character traits, and he stands apart from others regarding them, So too he must be distinct in his deeds, in his eating, in his drinking, in his marital relations, his use of the bathroom, in his speech, in his walk, in his clothes, in satisfying his needs, and in his business dealings. All such deeds as his should be especially pleasant and proper. The Talmud even goes so far as to compare one's dining table to the altar in the holy temple. When the temple stood, the altar effected atonement for a person. However, now that the temple no longer stands, a person's dining table effects atonement for him. How does eating become a spiritual experience, let alone comparable to the surface of the altar in the holy temple? Simply put, the battle of bread, and by extension all permissible physical activity, is determined by our intention and approach. Eating can be an act of hedonism or an act of holiness, depending not only upon what we eat, but how we eat. The Torah states, "For not on bread alone will man live, but upon that which issues forth from God's mouth." In the Lurianic mystical tradition, this verse speaks of the physical potential hidden within the physical food we eat. The challenge is to recognize and consciously connect to the divine energy present within food and all physicality. This is not so simple. In overtly spiritual experiences such as prayer, meditation, and fasting, we are focused entirely on the spiritual realm. When we eat or engage in any other physical act, it is much harder to remain conscious of the spirit concealed within the material world, as our physical appetites, when given free rein, tend to dominate our awareness. However, by cultivating the awareness of the food's divine origin and expressing that awareness by reciting a blessing before and after eating, we are able to align and integrate the physical and spiritual dimensions of our lives into a unified whole. Furthermore, beyond the initial act of articulated awareness, what we do with the indwelling divine energy matters too. For eating to be a truly holy act, we need to ensure that we utilize the energy we receive from the food to grow morally and spiritually in study, prayer, and good deeds. The spiritual complexity of eating helps explain a curious Talmudic statement. R. Yehuda, the Nasi, says, "It is prohibited for an ignoramus to eat meat." He expounds, "Anyone who engages in Torah study is permitted to eat meat, and anyone who does not engage in Torah study is prohibited from eating the meat of animals or fowl." In many traditions, the more spiritually sensitive one is, the more they are encouraged to abstain from eating meat. According to Judaism, however, the heights of spirituality are attained not by abstaining from foods like meat, but by enjoying and elevating them. In fact, the spiritually delicate act of refining other forms of life is reserved specifically for those who are most spiritually sophisticated, and therefore capable of this unique spiritual art form. In other words, Judaism encourages us to engage the world more deeply and directly, not less, by finding ways to contextualize our material pursuits and engagements within a spiritual framework, thereby elevating them and us. Taking this spiritually embodied perspective even further, the sages teach that if a person's home is compared to the temple, and their dining table to the altar, their bedroom is considered the Holy of Holies. As discussed in the previous chapter in the Jewish traditions, acts of love and intimacy are not shameful activities that a couple engages in despite their religious devotions. Rather, they are considered acts of holiness when done in the right context and with the right intention. The notion of becoming one flesh and experiencing such unity with another is sacred inasmuch as it mirrors God's oneness on high. Moreover, it is through marital relations that one comes closest to the act of creation itself by bringing new life into this world. In a broader sense, marriage itself is a holy practice. Unlike other monastic traditions that idealize the abstinence and encourage celibacy among their clergy, In Judaism, the high priest was not allowed to perform the service of Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year, if he was not married. In fact, so critical was it for the high priest to be married when performing the holiest service of the year that a woman would be designated before Yom Kippur as his wife in waiting should his current wife suddenly pass away on Yom Kippur. Um, the celebration and sanctification of all aspects of life and the human condition is Judaism's response to the overwhelming urge to compartmentalize our lives into separate spheres: heaven and earth, soul and body, sacred and secular. Similarly, many people perceive a separation between their religious and personal domains, leading them, for example, to see the synagogue, or church as that matter, as a place for spiritual life, and their homes as the personal space where they live out their mundane lives. Against such a dichotomization, Judaism teaches that spirituality is not just the battle to find connection between prayer or meditation. Rather, it is equally, if not more importantly, expressed and experienced in how and why we eat, sleep, relate, and do business. And therefore, while the synagogue is the place where we gather with others for prayer, our homes are the holy temples where heaven earth meets earth in the totality of our lives. Thank you. I hope that was audible.